Hi, Ed Slaper again from the Southeastern Trust, and thanks for turning into this clip. The third clip in our series. Now, this is catchy. Now, this might be the longest clip we make in this series because you're putting this word together. Catching it is part of what I'm going to call self-regulation. Now, what is self-regulation? Self-regulation is knowing what you're thinking, feeling, and doing. It's being able to look inward. A really important part of well-being that you know when things aren't right and you can adjust it. So it's really important. Now, can people become aware of what they're thinking? Can we change what we're thinking? Yes, we can, particularly if we know how and then work on it. And like we said, this is about work. It's practice, taking these skills and practice them. So how to get more control of your thinking. Now on page 8, we put the model we use in Bend Don't Break, in the booklet. We pretty simple, catch it. Recognize that on those unhelpful thoughts, and your feelings are a good place to be aware. When you start to have feelings, catch it. What are you thinking? Pause it. Don't try to stop a thought. Pause it. Create that thinking time. Then challenge it. Use that thinking time to challenge that initial thought. And then if you can, change it. Now, from page 8 to 20, we talk about this model and the skills in it. Now, catch it is the first part. Now, one of the challenges with automatic thoughts, our minds are exceptionally busy. Like that model, situations happen, thousands every day. Our senses are constantly taking in information. The average human being, are you ready for this? 50 to 60,000 thoughts a day. And some of those could be negative. They simply pop in our head with no control. That's normal. And human beings, we do tend to have a negative bias. We tend to see the bad. If you're walking down the street and an ambulance is parked in front of the house, don't we automatically think, well, something's wrong, somebody's hurt? I don't know. The person could be stopped there, he could live there and just letting the dog out. But we tend to, that negativity bias, we jump in with the bad. Now, the challenge with unhelpful thinking, if it's automatic and it's hidden, we're not fully aware of it. It's like some situations happen, and it's like having a recorder on the head, click on with unhelpful songs. And if they're a bit distorted, well, they're under the surface. That's the thing. 95% of these thoughts that pop in there, we're not fully aware of them. But if we're distorted, well, we don't see them. We ignore any evidence. They seem reasonable, so we don't challenge it. But if they're negative and unhelpful, well, they seem reasonable enough, but we don't challenge them. It's like a snowball rolling downhill. How can we become more aware of what we're thinking? Now, our feelings, our emotions are a good way to recognize it. Being able to, that's self-regulation, knowing what we're feeling. As we stated before, there's a link between thinking, feelings, what's happening in the body, and behavior. Naming what you're feeling is a good step. Now, emotions, naming our emotional feelings, I go back to the brain. When stress starts to build, those stress hormones hit, we start to have those big feelings. Putting a name on what you feel seems simple enough, but when you name it, you can begin to tame it. You can begin to tell your nervous system, get a bit of control. And we'll need to do more than that, but it's a good starting point, naming what you feel. And it's, on page 10 of the workbook, some of the feelings we have are very predictable. If we're feeling attacked, we're going to have fear, anger. We feel something's a threat. To feel anxious, pretty normal. Feel loss, well, sadness, it's a very normal emotion. Feelings are normal. It's what we do with them. Now, naming your feelings, putting a name on what you feel. Now, we're taking this from Steve Biddulph. Steve Biddulph is a child psychologist from Australia. Now, he would say in one of his books he wrote, and the references in the workbook, he would say there are only 4 emotions: anger, sadness, fear, and joy. You can take each one of those emotions, put them all in a continuum, mild, middle, and extreme, and just about every emotional word fits somewhere along that continuum, somewhere. And take anger. On one side, we could be a bit irritated. That's mild anger. But if you're furious and seething, that's way up here. Can we be more accurate to name what we feel. So in the workbook, in the skills pack, we have 3 sheets to help people begin to practice these skills. Where in my body am I feeling these emotions? Does my head feel like a volcano ready to explode? Does my heart pound out of my chest? Do I feel like I have the weight of the world on my shoulder? Get more accurate in naming what you feel. And there's a little exercise. Think about words that would describe those 3 feelings: fear, anger, and sadness: mild, middle, and extreme. Now, if you're not good at putting a name on it, put a number on it. That could be useful. And the third worksheet, feelings are temporary. They are going to pass. And if we could picture feelings like clouds, ride the storm, these too shall pass. So naming your feeling, riding the storm, and recognizing where they are in the body are a good starting point. Now, when we begin to name what we feel, the second part of Catch It is name that unhelpful thinking style. What are we thinking? Now, there's 10 types of unhelpful thinking. We talk about this in page 14 and 15 in the workbook. Black and white thinking, it's all or nothing. It's either good or bad, no extreme. Overgeneralizing, we think something's going to last forever. It's a pattern. Have you ever said this? 2 or 3 unhelpful things happen to you in the morning. Oh, it's going to be one of those days. We're overgeneralizing. Now, these next 2 are closely related: mental filter and disqualifying the positive. Mental filter will dwell on the bad. Where's the good go? If 10 things happen to you today, 9 good, 1 bad. At the end of the day, what are we thinking about? It's that negativity bias. It's normal, probably the bad. Jumping to conclusions, we migrate. We'll look at somebody and we'll think what they're thinking. We start to mind read, or we're fortune tell. We'll predict something's going to turn out bad. Making a mountain out of a molehill, we turn an inconvenience into a disaster. We just explode. Go back to the brain, the amygdala. When I filter for danger, sometimes they call that the amygdala hijack. We make a mountain out of a molehill. Emotional reasoning. If I feel it, therefore it must be true. So if we begin to have strong feelings, well, I feel it, then it must be true. And should statements, do we put ourselves under unrealistic pressure? Should, must, ought to, have to. It's unrealistic. We're expecting far too much of ourselves or other people. Labeling. You start putting labels on yourself, calling yourself names, and that's really unhelpful. A lot of the labels we put they're critical comment. And I'm going to bring this into this conversation. You ever call yourself stupid? I sure hope not, because when we do that, and I have worries about that. When we say I am, well, that's a trait. That's something about me. Well, if you say I feel stupid, well, that's a feeling. Or it's temporary. It's going to pass. Or it's a behavior. I did something stupid. By not labeling, we start to tend to own what we're feeling. And it's all my fault. You blame yourselves for things totally unconnected to you. Now, these types of unhelpful thinking, they're normal. We all do it. But the big question, how much do we get locked into this? And like we talked earlier, they're like a snowball rolling downhill, and all that negative, unhelpful thinking just fuels this all the more. So see if you can work on this little exercise. It's in the book. It's on page 16. And we call it see if you can name it exercise. Here's Dick. And he's applied for a job. He really wanted it. He didn't get it. Oh, he's disappointed. That's a very natural reaction. But if we take Nick and he's very negative about it, and we look down through the unhelpful thinking list, what would he be saying to himself? What would he be feeling? Oh, got it. I didn't get it. What would he be thinking? Oh, I'm dwelling on the bad. I didn't get the job. And he's discounting the positive. Well, I did pretty good at the interview. I could learn from it. He's certainly fortune telling. And if he adds in negativity, it's going to last forever. I'll never get work. What would he do? He certainly would be less likely to apply for another job after that. So just take a look at that little exercise. Put yourself in Nick's shoes and see what you would do. Now, in the skills pack, we have a little sheet. We call it the thought spotter. Let's begin to practice catching first our feeling, what happened? There's a box, what happened? What's the situation? But what was I feeling? Put a name on it. If you can't put a name on it, name the feeling, put a number on it on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, but then what types of unhelpful thinking was I doing? Now, the more we begin to practice catch it, that moves us into the next step. And that's equally as important. How do we learn how to push the pause button? But that's going to come next. Thanks for tuning into this. Let's practice it. There's the sheet and the skills pack to do it. And we hope to see you in the next clip. Thanks very much.